Welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang and Simon, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush, we can actually see each other doing this podcast for the first time in a long time. It's not the first time ever this has happened, but still, I feel like this is a monumental occasion. I just gotta say, your beard is coming in great, and that's a tease for people that want to see us on YouTube, but the beard looks fantastic.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. How many episodes have we done between each other now? Almost 400, and probably about 6 of them have been done where we can actually see each other. So it's always very interesting.
The illusion is gone, though. For some reason, I always used to think that you were recording these in some sort of hovel, like with a Wi-Fi stick and a possible something hanging, a microphone hanging from a cave kind of thing. But now I just see that you're in an apartment in Vancouver.
What is a hovel? I don't know what that is.
I guess a cool cave, or like a regulated cave, basically a hovel.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that seems reasonable. That's where I do it on alternative weeks, right? Sometimes it's in the bedroom, sometimes it's in a hovel. Like Miami, as a beautiful transition. Okay. Yes, the wonderful city of Miami. Before we get into some mea culpas as well about Miami, because I have some regrets. About what we said last week, but did you watch the 2023 Pickleball Slam featuring Andre Agassi, John McEnroe, Andy Roddick, and Michael Chang? Did you watch that on Sunday? No, I mean, I wasn't being paid like they were to go to this event, so I chose not to do so. So
listen, I know where we stand on pickleball on Open Era, and we don't have a good opinion about it. But a couple of things have happened over the course of the last week. Friend of the show, Owen Lewis, writing an article in Popcorn Tennis about pickleball and maybe our approach, the cynics' approach to pickleball, and perhaps us needing to take a new lens, but also watching this made-for-TV event that was on during the same time as the Miami final. It was kind of okay. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen in the world. It was kind of cool to see Andre Agassi playing something. Michael Chang to be playing again before our era, probably, where we weren't able to watch him all the time. It wasn't that bad.
How much money have they paid you? Like, just curious.
Not enough, man. Not nearly enough. And here I am saying this.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I just came off watching the Dan Olsen video on the metaverse and Decentraland. And this whole idea, there is a point I'm coming to here. There is a point in general about the idea of fabricating things out of thin air and trying to get people on board with it without there actually being an end product in place, i.e. the metaverse in general, which, you know, is basically total bullshit. It's just marketing talk. Is that not what pickleball is?
I'm totally on board. I think I would be totally on board. But while I was watching this, other people at the establishment I was at were also watching this and asked to put it on. And said, I hope they don't ruin pickleball for the rest of us, because they play. It was a stunning remark. And I'm not saying these people are in our age group. I'd say they were like 50 plus.
Shocking.
But they love this game. They love this game. And they also got disposable, more than disposable. But they've ruined the rest of the world for that. So then I think the legs are there. Basically, what I would say is that it's not so much that as like if, it's now, and what are the solutions we're providing as an alternative sport as tennis?
Yes, true. What is the phraseology that gets thrown around online? Baby boomers mooched off their parents, stole from their children, I believe is the terminology. How would we fit that into a justification of pickleball? Mooched off tennis courts, stole from, I don't know.
It wasn't my goal.
Something.
It wasn't my goal to derail the first 5 minutes of the latest Open Air on this, but
Dev, we should also just just to cut you off. I hope they don't ruin it for us.
What is that also? I was like, wait, what do you mean?
Can you just explain something to me?
Excuse me? Care to elaborate on that? Who is us in this? No, fantastic point. Yes, and don't get me wrong. There is some pushback from my side on the end of this conversation, but let's get off of that. Let's get off of that to actual tennis. And again, we love this sport. Don't get it twisted. We love this sport, even though we last week ranked the worst tournament of the bigger ones to be Miami. But Bush, I will say, fast courts are good courts, and fast courts make for good tennis. And I think we got a glimpse of that in Miami, and we didn't really see that in Indian Wells. And I think the general consensus is this is a surprise, and like people are like, oh, like this, they're faster than usual. But I don't really think that's the case. Like, I'm curious, what do you think about this? What do you think about the fact that A, we're going to get into the WTA final, but B, the courts are faster and it made for better tennis?
Yeah, it's a good question. I thought it was a fun week. I thought there was some good matches, and I think highlighted probably the match of the year between Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. I think that's probably fair.
Wow, what? The year? Charlie was dead for half the match, though.
But that was the drama of the whole thing.
Of course. Okay, he did it all, the full it all. All right.
I have been steadily drip feeding my conspiracy theory around tennis balls over court speed into Discord for the last 4 months. So I may be a tennis ball truther at this point over a court speed person.
He's
in
posting YouTube videos now about the ball size. Yeah, that's true though.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because as we're starting into the baseball calendar season, just the history of the baseball in general, in quotations, about how whether it's juiced or deadened or any of the things that come with it. And
balls at Yankee Stadium being somehow more prone to flying out of the yard during Aaron Judge's record chase.
Exactly. And just an overall lack of transparency with MLB in regards to buying the literal manufacturer of a baseball and not really giving any opening of how these things are made or what the QA process is on it.
Nothing to see here.
No problems at all. And that's kind of my question to tennis as well, which, as I firmly place the tinfoil hat on my head, is whether or not the tennis balls are maybe more important than overall court speed. I think this is the position that I have landed on, which is that you will find people who will talk blue in the face about how Wimbledon courts have not got slower. The tennis balls have sure as shit got slower during that period of time, though. And I think one is far more damaging and far more problematic.
What's easier to change as well? Let's be honest here. The courts are kind of hard, right? These are just larger surfaces.
It's true. Yeah. Fluffgate. I think we're getting into double entendre at that point. So perhaps we can move on slightly from this point. But yeah, I would be open to an expose on the evolution of the tennis ball and how much that's changed, and it's changed the style of play that we've seen on the tour, because I think this court was certainly quicker than last year and certainly quicker than Indian Wells. And I think it produced a different style of tennis, which I think is fascinating, because you could argue that the final 4 or the final 8, the latter stage of the tournament, was not all that different than what we saw 2 weeks ago.
100%. And the winner of this tournament is Petra Kvitova, which I think is a wonderful moment for everyone who kind of likes good things in tennis and who aren't vampires and terrible people and like to see good people get good things. Petra Kvitova, who I think this is worth the conversation, Bush, and it's no fault of her own. It's because I am. I'll speak for me. I'll stop generalizing, but I'm caught up by the next new thing or the next big thing, and I've seen a couple of majors won, or I've seen a couple 1,000 titles won. I'm like, cool. What's next, But I think Petra Kvitova has proven that the longevity, the fact that she has been able to withstand multiple eras and now ranks among her peers who everyone kind of thought she wasn't in that same class. She is there. All right, Bush, let's get into the WTA side. A feel-good story. Petra Kvitova winning Miami, her 30th title, cementing herself as a Hall of Famer. I think that's the discourse now, which is not controversial. I think you would agree, not controversial at all.
No, definitely not. To win 2 Grand Slam titles, to be up to 30 in terms of singles titles, is a feat that's not many women have achieved in the sport. I think one of the more fascinating things about her in general is that she's never been to world number 1. And I think it's a thing that you'll look back at the end of this in a Hall of Fame ceremony and think, really? Only world number 2? I could have sworn that she got up to that number 1 ranking, but never did. Closest that she got was after that Wimbledon final. But interesting point on Petra Kvitova as well is that I think a lot of people are going to look at this and think this title came out of nowhere, and all the things that have come back. Her season's been really good. Her losses that she's had so far are all losses that you kind of make sense. She loses to Sakkari 2 weeks ago in Indian Wells. She loses to Krejcikova in Dubai. In Qatar, she loses to Goff in a match that was very, very close and could have gone either way. And in Australia, she loses to Kalina, which is a bad loss. And it's the only bad loss that you can circle on the calendar year and think that she should not have really, lost that match. The rest of it, though, she's been in really good form. So this is not a surprise, I think, to people who've been playing close attention. And I think it's testament to that point we were just making about court speed and ball speed, potentially, is that this is a surface that really did suit her. And she was getting a lot of extra pop on that serve.
100%. Talked about the big three, or maybe the new big three forming on the WTA side, and the fact that Rybakina, Sabalenka, Iga Swiatek have certain qualities that lend themselves well. So maybe their serves not being where they need them to be on a given day. And I think Petra Kvitova is kind of falling into that same sphere where it would be kind of ridiculous to write her off in the bigger tournaments down the road. That being said, were you taken aback maybe by the fact that we ended up this way, Bush? And it was not Rybakina there, because I think we expected that, but on the also rans or the other people on the WTA side, there seems to be not a gulf in style, but there is, I don't want to call them the pushers, but the people who are exceptionally defensively and being able to get balls back at every turn are no longer finding it kind of easy to subsist against the power players with the quote unquote new balls.
Oh, Ballgate. What have I done? I've opened up a can of worms on this one.
It kind of checks out, though. Doesn't it kind of check out, though? I mean, small sample size, et cetera, but also.
Yeah. Someone write that expose, please. I'm begging you. We don't really have investigative reporters inside of tennis, do we? Ben Rothenberg. Paging Ben. The kind of thing that he would do? Probably, right? Who else is in this sport? Courtney Wynn. She's also in this. So whatever, we'll keep going. So the question is whether or not this surface was negating pushes. Is that roughly where we're looking at on this one?
Yeah, and just a general, maybe the style of tennis that was so lovely coined big babe tennis, which I think is probably offensive. I mean, I don't feel good saying it at all, but also I'll say it again, big babe tennis. Maybe it's back. Maybe the fact it's back, that you need to hit the piss out of the ball, that's how you're going to win points. And not to say it was ever out of vogue, but I think there was a different route to big titles that we've seen from different players along the way.
I do think trends in the WTA are different than the ATP in terms of a movement and a moment of what players is successful. I actually don't know whether or not that quote unquote big babe tennis stuff is accurate in 2023. I need to go back and actually look at some of the data and look at some of the people that have been successful so far this year. Because I wouldn't actually. I feel like Sabalenka is the person that someone would circle in that, of being like the poster child of that as a category.
Right.
But I would also. Iga Swiatek is not that, right? In no capacity. And I also don't think, despite the stature and the frame.
This is where we can take this back, though, is what I'm saying. We can take I think big babe tennis also had this idea of like being denigrating to a certain degree, where it doesn't matter how literally big you are. If you hit big, you can be a big hitter. You can be considered in that vein, Like, I think it's not about your literal stature. It's about how well you could execute timing the ball and hitting it well.
I love the idea that it's like, no, we need to offer qualifiers to big babe tennis. A, you must be big, and B, you must be a babe.
I'm just saying, and again, now to dive into my own stereotype, Petra Kvitova was one of the prototypes, you could say. I would say probably one of the best clean hitters that we've seen in the last 30 years.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. Someone very, very graceful on court, despite the labels that could get thrown about overall stature and power that she has. She moves very elegantly around the tennis court. Maybe the most aesthetically pleasing serve on the WTA. I think that's probably true in terms of technical ability and fluidness or fluidity. It's very, very nice, very pleasing to watch. That level of repeatability that she has on serve is really lovely. She's just a really, really good player. And to continue to do what she is doing and to have this run just back into the world's top 10, I saw an article that was talking about her being inside of the world's top 10 in money list all time, not just men and women. So combined together, that she made it into the top 10 based upon this final win. She's going to have a good year, and watch out for Wimbledon, right? Like if she keeps this form going, there's no reason to believe, in a lot of ways actually, that this final could not be very close to the final that we get at Wimbledon as well.
Tumani Carriol put out a tweet after Petra won and just listing off her stats, but the big game player, or like the fact that being a big game player and not wilting when the spotlights are on, 30-11 in finals, 26-8 in 500 levels and above. That's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good considering the players that she was playing. Cause like this is another player that kind of crossed some generations here, Bush, who had not just the end of Serena and those folks, but like very good Serena and those folks as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Almost 3 generations that she's managed to go across as well, and has seen many players off. When was her first Wimbledon title? A long time ago now. I want to say 2014. Is that right?
You're stretching me, but I want to say even before that.
2011?
2012. Here's my other thing about Elena Rybakina. Just someone that you really like watching playing at her top level, someone who's easy to cheer for, who I really, even as much as I wanted to see Petra win, God, I would have been happy if she did the Sunshine Double here. It would have been great for me.
Yeah, and stories floating around this week about her taking some of the prize money from Indian Wells and sending it back to the Kazakh Tennis Association, and specifically putting money into a young girls program inside of Kazakhstan as well, which is really lovely to see. She seems like a genuinely really nice person, someone that has made a lot of fans during this run because she's an exciting player to watch. She, yes, imposes her will on the game and on her opponents, but she does it in a way that I think is very, very exciting as well. Like it's a brand of, I think hers is the closest brand to like smothering that you find on the WTA. That she almost comes across as a big blanket where she's just like wrapping her opponent up and it's almost impossible to escape it. That's kind of how I see her. And she's been so good this year that it's, I don't see any signs of this slowing down. This doesn't feel like a flash in the pan. This seems incredibly consistent to me. And I'm really excited to see what she does in clay.
We got a whole clay season coming up, but God, I want to see her go back to Wimbledon again and just say hi. Say hi to some people maliciously. Elsewhere on the tour, before we're going to cover a lot of other stuff, including the Wimbledon ban being lifted and Bianca's end at this tournament as well. But the Sabalenka lost to Kvitová. Bush, Kvitová is serving now well because she apparently has Thomas Johansson as her coach, I believe. Shockingly. A lot of people supporting terrible regimes left in this drop as well. I'm just saying. I guess Potapova is one bag. Trevisan is another. But Kvitová is just a whole different element in terms of the should you trust as much as you want to believe on social media posts about what they actually believe in?
Certainly those 3 are players that I would not really be down to get a drink with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The Sabalenka loss, though, she was extremely not harsh on herself, but I guess the level she perceives herself to be at is accurate, and you shouldn't be losing to Sorana Kvitová, I guess, at this point in the game, even though it's not a Grand Slam. I think that's good, maybe in the grand scheme of things.
There is a thin line in the sport of tennis and how you hold yourself and present yourself to the world between confidence and arrogance. I feel like this season you have found Anya Sabalenka very much walking that line in confidence because her results have backed it up. I think she has an enormous, enormous target on her back inside of the locker room and inside of just the general, not least because she's the world number 2 and she's the reigning Grand Slam champion for the first one of the season. But I think if you're going to talk shit, you're going to have to expect to back it up.
Chat shit, get banged is the, I believe Socrates once said that as well. We leave the hard courts, Bush. Again, major shouts to Petra Kvitova. We're fans, big fans, and I would love to see her continue to bag big titles. But we go to the clay, and there's some people out there, including literal savants. We got some people in our Discord who know more about tennis than I think us, both of us combined, Bush. But the idea that Iga is now basically resting for this clay season and waiting to beast as we hit Europe, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
I think 2 weeks ago, I said that she will have a historic clay court season. I have seen nothing to suggest that that's not going to be the case. I think the losses that she's had on hard court this year are all understandable.
They're reasonable
They're all
losses.
Completely reasonable where she's at in her career, even though she's a Grand Slam champion on a hard court. I think it's a different kind of hard court at the US Open than you find at Indian Wells, certainly in Miami, even though she didn't play the second one. She's the best clay court player in the world. She's still the best player in the world. I think she's still the best player, man or woman, in the world. I think that's probably true. I think she's going to absolutely dominate this clay court season.
I mean, I'm looking at the contenders on clay, maybe especially, and I'm not seeing much, but that's why they play the games. Anything else WTA wise from Miami, Bush? I mean, we'll get to Bianca in parting shots, but anything else?
I thought it was interesting to see how easily Jess Pegula was beaten in that semifinal. I don't think it's been a great month or so in terms of how she's trying to find her footing. I think it's one to just keep an eye on of how her form rebounds and how she carries herself into the clay court season.
Here's my other thing. I think she'll be a threat at Roland Garros. More so than Rybakina, maybe.
I don't agree, but we'll wait and see on that one.
We'll keep that going forward. All right. When we come back after the break, it's the ATP. Daniil Medvedev doing the damn thing. Maybe he can win a big clay court tournament. We'll see. Coming up after the break. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast. Well, I mean, burying people is what we do on this show. That's my specialty, at least. So like, oh, this guy's done. Or, oh, him, he's finished. Her, she'll never play again. And usually they come back and they win pretty well. Otherwise, it's Ash Barty. And I'm like, no, she'll play again, whether she wants to or not. But we had a conversation about ceilings, Bush, a few weeks ago about Jannik Sinner. And I watched him this week, and I watched him play up to the crowd who maybe wasn't fully on board, but then was on board. And I thought to myself, how dare I write off people this young, this early in their careers. It was a fun week for me on the ATP side, and that's rarely said. And I think it's a testament to the fact that you had the two vanguards of the tour for possibly the next 10 years holding court.
Certainly did. And those being Danny Medvedev and Karen Khachanov.
Yes. We love KK. We love KK, though. We have to.
We do. We stand. So let's chat about that semi-final between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner for a second. I think also featured potentially the rally of the season as well.
It did.
It's absolutely remarkable. And I think if you're looking for the future of tennis, encapsulated of what it's going to look like aesthetically and stylistically, just go and watch that rally. It contains everything you possibly could want to see. Incredible athleticism, absolutely murdering tennis balls in terms of consistently hitting 85 plus on a rally ball, maneuvering your opponent around the court, and then still having the wherewithal and know-how to find a passing shot at the end of it, followed by Carlos Alcaraz looking like he's dead on the floor at the end of it.
Making eye contact with Jannik, and I'm like, what? Don't look at him. Don't look at him, man.
And that's just the tennis side of it. I think from a personality standpoint as well, just two nice kids as well going at it. And there seems to be a healthy respect and a rivalry there, which is fun to watch in the sense that they don't seem like dickheads, which is always a good starting point for the ATP, especially the ATP top 10. So I'm just stoked to see that these two have played each other 6 times now, 3 apiece. You could probably say overall the wins that Carlos Alcaraz have had are probably quality wins better. So it probably tips in his favor slightly. That being said, though, Sinner hangs with him, and he looks like a player that Alcaraz doesn't really want to face, right? It's a difficult matchup for him.
And we can say that like Carlos wasn't at his peak physical fitness at stages in that match, and I think it was evident that's fair. But God, that was important for Jannik to win. I think going forward, that is a match he needed to have. not only the belief is one thing. Carlos Alcaraz knows how to play to the crowd. He knows how to get people on his side. And I think Jannik Sinner, during that match, I saw a new level to him where I'm like, okay, he understands the game he has to play, not just with himself, but with the people around him to generate that energy needed to beat someone of Carlos Alcaraz's level. So I thought that was wonderful to see. That point that we talked about, and they kind of mirrored it. I saw it on Reddit. They mirrored it to a Novak point, and like the similarities are there. Sin Boy needs just one other gear though, right? There's something else. There's probably something else that he needs to get to, but you see matches like that and it's like, he's not far away.
I actually don't think he has a whole lot to improve tennis wise in terms of what he needs to. I think a lot of it is physical and mental, because I think you saw in this final as well, the dude was fucked, right? He was completely and utterly shagged.
He's done.
He was completely cooked after admittedly a 3-hour semi-final, which was both emotionally and physically grueling. It was 30 degrees on court. The humidity was off the charts, and he was playing against the octopus, against the stretchy boy himself, which is not a nice matchup to go back to back on. And he couldn't handle it. I mean, that's the honest and damning criticism of it. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean, because it's really damn hard to do that back to back. Because I think he is, and it's interesting you're talking about cleanest ball strikers on the WTA with Petra Kvitova. I think Jannik Sinner is the cleanest ball striker on the ATP. I think he's just...
Oh, man, it's crisp. I mean, I think Karen Khachanov is up there as well, which also a semifinalist, but 100%.
He carries the racket so loosely, Jannik Sinner. He's so relaxed in striking a tennis ball that I think the racket is going to slip out of his hand. It's astonishing the way that he generates the power and the direction that he does, given how just fluid he looks. It's genuinely beautiful.
And the final was one thing, and I know he sapped of his energies and no longer once there, but I love to see him enthusiastic or in it in a different way that I say this as someone who does love showmanship and who does love gallivanting and people who are in your face, but I don't think you have to be that to be successful. And I hate maybe putting people into boxes when it's like, why don't you show more emotion, or why don't you care more, or why is it your heart on your sleeve? I don't like forcing people to do that. That being said, there are times to me when I wish I could see a little bit more from Jannik Sinner. I saw that in the semifinal. I was like, holy hell, he wants this really badly. He wants this really badly, and it makes me reassess maybe how limiting I was on his ceiling, because there's some fire underneath him. The thing is, though, endurance, longevity, withstanding 5-set matches over the course of 2 weeks. Maybe we were not that far off, though, in our assessment when we were talking about ceilings, though.
And he clearly has made significant progress on it. I don't think anyone can deny it. If you look at the physical stature from where he was last year to how he is this year, he looks much thicker. He looks much more energetic. He holds himself a lot better on court. I think in losing that final to Daniil Medvedev, his body language was not great, though. He definitely could sense early that he was done. I think it was that 21 shot rally early in the first set when he was up a break. Just both dudes absolutely crushing tennis balls, just annihilating tennis balls. And then at the end of it, to lose it in the way that he did, he never really recovered from that moment. And I think he knew at that point his body was not going to last. It's definitely reminiscent of early Andy Murray, is it not? Someone who is just not capable of hanging, just not physically grown into the stature.
Does Jez know Italian? Does Jez
get him on the plane? Damn it!
Yeah.
But they were talking about this on the broadcast as well here in Canada, so on the world feed, and talking about how you look at the difference in stature and the difference in physicality, and how both of these athletes, being Alcaraz and Sinner, have grown into their body. Alcaraz is clearly much further along in terms of physical progression and physical stature. That's not to say that Sinner won't get there, because the same thing is true. It takes longer for some people to get to their physical prime. And I think that's where he's at the moment, is it's just going to take him a bit of extra time. It's going to take another grueling season and another grueling off season, but you're going to see an absolute machine and robot and someone who understands the vigors of the tour coming back next year. And I think watch out at that point, because I do mean it. Like, the cleanest ball striker on tour, that's going to take you a very long way. That's going to take you inside of the world's top 5. It's just about how much further it can take him after that.
And I'll say that semifinal was on Friday night at like 7 p.m. Eastern time in Toronto. People were asking me where they could watch that. And I'm not just saying that as a anecdotal. I mean, like, earnestly. People were like, where is this on? Because this is the next 10 years, hopefully, of men's tennis. We'd be so lucky to have them continue to play throughout so many years.
Yeah, and I think the nice transition to that is the present of men's tennis is Daniil Medvedev on a hard court. 5 finals, winning 4 of them. He looks like the best hard court player in the world. I don't think there's any real denying that. The only thing that stood in his way was an absolute stinker in the final 2 weeks ago in Indian Wells. He is a nightmare to play against. And the consistency that he has found during the opening part of this season is very reminiscent to him at his peak back in 2020 or 2021, when he was winning that Grand Slam. So look out, man. Like, he's going to be there or thereabouts all season, especially on the blue stuff. Excited.
He's definitely going to win one of the weird clay court tournaments, like one of the non-normal ones, maybe Madrid. So you're like, I'll win this tournament, but not be a factor on the clay. I want to be this guy and harp on the fact that the schedule is insane and weird, but the fact that we are going to clay now. Do you think Danny is part of the conversation going forward when we talk about winning these Masters titles? Because he should be, shouldn't he? On the merits, on what he's just done, and the fact that his game kind of seems like it would work.
Yeah, I think there is some stuff here that is just a lot harder for him to impose his game style on those surfaces, on the really slow stuff.
Yeah.
I don't see him winning a title this year on clay. I just don't think he's a very good clay court player across the board. Like, the biggest things that he has and the strengths that he has are so nullified on that surface that he goes from being someone who is easily a top 3 player in the world to just being a top 30 player. And I think that's fine. Like, I think if his results this year on clay are reminiscent of someone who's inside of the world's top 30, I think that's okay. I think the real interesting one is how he does on grass. I think I'm more interested to see, because I think he has bigger strides to make on that surface and the way that he can adapt his game. Because yes, it's awkward and it's technically a bit weird, but he moves really well. And if he's able to smother balls and get them back into court on that quicker surface with lower bounces, I think he's a bit of a tricky matchup for a lot of people on that surface.
No, I think you're right. Just ending on Miami, some highs and lows, disappointment. Taylor Fritz, I thought that quarterfinal against Charlie could have been something. It wasn't anything at all. It was a bag of nothing. I'll say that, Bush.
It was, and it also, I think, showed the level difference as well between them as well, of just simply how good Carlos Alcaraz is. And that's no disrespect to Taylor Fritz, because he's obviously become a very good top 10 player in the world.
There's levels to this.
But there are levels to this. And I think we saw that fully evidenced in that quarterfinal.
Christopher Eubanks making the quarterfinals. I mean, fantastic. What a phenomenal player, but also, again, someone who's going to be a phenomenal broadcaster. He's doing it now. He should probably do all the matches when he's at any tournament he's at, based on who else they have on some of these calls. But I thoroughly loved him on the call, and as well as his serve and volley. There was a point there when I thought he was going to flummox Daniil Medvedev with a serve and volley, but eventually the luck ran out. I will say, though, Bush, that bottom half of this tournament, and even the top half, it's a lot of guys who have not been good this year, been quite poor. And I don't want to shine a light on Felix, but I feel like Felix might be one of those guys as well, where everything to play for in the clay court season. But holy hell, like there's a lot to make up here. Like Novak is now going to be allowed to play. It sounds like you're letting a line out into the court now, and we'll see what Rafa's doing. I think Rafa is now very pessimistic on his return, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to play before the French Open at some point. But those guys are coming back into the play. The other people around them, like what? It's Alcaraz, it's Sinner, and then who else?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think it's also interesting as well that we got a peek at life without both Djokovic and Nadal out for differing reasons, but seeing the Sunshine Double without both of them there. On the men's side, I didn't miss either of them. I thought it was great. I thought it was really fun.
I think I'm on the record saying the U.S. changing their vax laws or who can get into their country, who can't, at this point are pretty ridiculous based on what else they're doing. Like I as much as I'm like, haha, you should have got vaccinated, Novak, etc. This seems a bit bizarre to me. I kind of want to see him on these hard courts, Bush, because I feel like it's a lie. It's all a lie. It's not real. It's all real, but as much as it is, it's not. Arguably, the best player in the world is not there. So then what? What are we talking about?
And I don't think it's been quite put into perspective how old both Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic are in terms of their placement inside of the world's top 20. We're talking like 7, 8, 9 years difference to the average age of the top 20 now. The ATP is really young, like really, really young at the top end of the sport. And these dudes are very, very old. Like, and that golf is kind of fascinating to see how it plays out for the rest of the season.
Who's the closest guy to them in age in the top 20? Who would you guess?
Danny? It's got to be Medvedev, right? Medvedev's 28.
I think it's close because there's a couple people on there, 27th year. I think it might be Cam Norrie, though, which is a shockingly upsetting thing to consider. But yeah, that's where we are. That's a great point. Do you want to leave the ATP there? Shall we leave it there? Anything else? I guess I have one final salvo.
Go for it.
The Tsitsipas talk about how you would be penalized if you pulled out of a 1,000 Masters and you'd be removed points and no one being able to prove that's true or not. Stuff like that really, really drives home the point that like we need some better communication from the ATP on a lot of things. But wow, there was just a gulf in terms of like what we're able to know and what is actually divulged to us on an every week level.
I think that's very true. And it's giving more fodder to my discussion about the balls. The lack of transparency, man.
We'll get to the balls, all right. We'll leave it on that note. We'll get to the balls and parting shots, among other things, coming up next.
Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Devang, it's time for parting shots. And did you see the PDF I sent over earlier in the week? It was a declaration that you had to sign in order to continue to take part in the Open Era podcast.
There was some things in there, Bush. There were some things that I had to agree to that I was a bit apprehensive on. I won't lie. Pledging allegiance to who and to where?
Yeah. Let's just say the lawyers at Open Era had to go over that one a couple of times. Some of our partnerships.
Oh, God.
Of course, if you don't know what we're talking about, we are talking about the LTA reinstating Russian and Belarusian players with the proviso that there must be a signed declaration indicating neutrality in order to play inside of the UK. So at Wimbledon, at Queen's, at Eastbourne, at Nottingham, I want to say as well. So sure. This is obviously has been running for a while. We've reported on it a couple of times. And I think we knew this was the direction of travel in general. I think we knew that this was almost going to happen. I don't think we knew about the declaration, though. I think that is the one new bit that's interesting here.
And I think the way this was announced is very interesting because that is kind of buried in it, wasn't it?
It is, and it's such a huge deal. Like it's
because I wouldn't expect any of these people to do that. What the hell does that mean? What the hell? So you basically say, my government is wrong. I want to play at Wimbledon.
Yeah, and talk about putting yourself into a very vulnerable position.
That's like there's a whole other discussions happening then for your family, etc.
Like with all of these things, I would like to see that form. I would like to see what is written on that document.
But this is like such a, and not to pretend like the UK is any different than a bunch of other Western, I mean, Canada, God, we know, and the United States, we know, but holy hell, what a shitty way to try to get yourself out of taking some responsibility for actually making a call. You don't actually standing up on something.
Yeah. I mean, we covered this a lot last year when the ban happened, of that we both, I think, not to speak for you, felt that it was the wrong decision to go down that road and to stop effectively being, punishing individual athletes for the responsibility of the state and everything that goes with it. It's not a great look. It's discrimination, I think, of in a very dangerous way. We were both getting post 9/11 vibes around that time, and I think that is still true.
Sally Bolden, the chief executive, said that this was done to reduce as much as possible the chance of their nations capitalizing on any success. And I think it's a bit tone deaf to me that we are expecting individuals to basically say that they renounce their countries to compete in this tournament without any sort of idea of what the repercussions they could face when we are doing it all the time. When we're talking about the war itself and the fact there are repercussions on so many different levels that I don't think it'd be a bad thing if Daniil Medvedev said, I think the war is wrong. Don't get me wrong. I think that'd be fantastic. But I also understand why he might not do this. And he might not play Wimbledon.
I believe he already has said that on the record as well. And it's just different to say that on a piece of paper. What the fuck is this piece of paper for? Like, where does it go? Like, what's written on it? Any of that is... Anyway, it's very, very interesting to sort of look at the ins and outs of it. When I saw this and I read through the implications of this announcement, what I saw was this was 2 or 3 governing bodies whose decisions largely were a giant pissing contest against each other and really did not give a shit about the athletes that they were representing, because it sure as hell looked like to me that the LTA wanted to continue on the stance that they had. The ATP, WTA and ITF basically said, like, no, you can't do that or we'll put you under serious penalty. And as a result, the LTA got into a technicality war about what they would and wouldn't do. And I think they ended up with this where literally no one is happy about anything.
It's well said. And I mean, the ranking points are a disaster, right? So, I mean, there's some other factors at play here. I don't want to glad hand away the fact that this war is still going. There's millions of people displaced and enormous heartache and heart just terrible, terrible things happening. But I do think that we're now in the place where it's people scoring political points wherever they can to figure out how to get around the fact that there are still individuals involved in these tournaments who realistically don't have anything to do with this shit. And now they're going to be asked to probably put some things online on paper to say, I guess, that everything's okay and we're ready to play. So we'll see.
I think we made this point last year, effectively, that in order to arrive at this position from the LTA, you have to do a bunch of mental gymnastics to arrive at it. Because in the way that they released their press conferences and their statements and everything, they basically acknowledged and they admitted that this was a discriminatory practice. And they came out and they basically said from their actions, we don't give a fuck. Like, we don't care. We don't care.
You know what? So we discriminate everywhere else.
And that's the thing, right? Like, we can't sit here and say right or wrong decisions about things. Stranger things have ended a war. Yeah. I would bet everything that I own, and the course of history would bet everything it's own, that whether or not Russians and Belarusians play at Wimbledon is going to have fucking no difference at all about the outcome of this war.
No.
Zero. So at that point, it's almost loses entire meanings behind it.
There's the conversation, not to divert this conversation entirely, Bush, but the World Cup of Hockey not happening is because they really can't have Russia involved, right? Because basically, and it's like, well, we're not going to see McDavid and Crosby together. There not going to see best on best, and that sucks. And it's like, why not?
But you do get into an interesting discussion about team sports versus individual athletes, though. Like, I think there is something, there is some nuance there that I think is worthy of discussion. I do think any level of nuance has basically gone in this as an argument inside of tennis. And at that point, it basically becomes just, like I said before, I think this is just a pissing contest between two bodies.
Let's get to Bianca Andreescu. We talked about her last week a bunch because she was playing extremely well. Back to Bianca on hard courts being someone who potentially could win any tournament she enters. Unfortunately, a massive injury struck again at Miami. It was her ankle. I don't know if you've seen the video. I mean, you might have, probably you have if you're listening to this podcast, but the the sound emanating, quote, "I've never felt this kind of pain before," was jarring to hear. It looked super bad. She was wheelchaired off the court. On social media, she's recovering. She was out and about. I saw on a post, no timeline on the recovery bush. It sucks a lot. It sucks a lot because you're watching someone who is maybe getting right back to the place where we had saw her kind of take over the tour. But best wishes. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think some news came out, I think maybe yesterday, around it being ligament damage in her ankle and the timeline for recovery being, I think, relatively long. I don't think it's a short-term one. So
right.
Best wishes to her. Best wishes to the camp. It's going to be a long process, and it sucks because she just seemed to be getting back to good form, and she was having a really good week in Miami as well. So that is not great to see. Tennis is a brutal sport. It's injuries are a part of the game, but it sucks when you're getting them every single year.
Super sucked that her mom was there as well, and I could see like she was in tears. It was all around just awful. And yeah, I reiterate, there's few people like her on court who can entertain and who can build your imaginations with her shot selection, and she's one of those players. So she'll be desperately missed, and we really hope she can come back soon. The Davis Cup draw, Bush, whatever the Davis Cup is now. I know the PK crew is out, but we'll see what the hell the Davis Cup is in a few years. That being said, a tasty draw. Spain gets Serbia. I don't think Graf is playing there, but I assume Novak will play. So probably Charlie Alcaraz in a Davis Cup versus Novak. That would be fantastic to watch. And the Canadians, who are top seeds because they won the damn thing last year, even though the Australians are still extremely mad about it and sending a boomerang to cut off some of our heads. We have to go away to Italy to play in our first round. How is that legal? Didn't we just win the thing? Why are we playing away?
Goodness me, Dev. You so much fire coming from you over a tournament, which...
Honestly, though, I'm so glad PK and the crew and Cosmos is gone. Let's take this tournament back to its roots, back to just unmanageable ties in the farthest corners of the world in which the best players can't play. So it's your random players, your fifth string, your sixth string. That's the Davis Cup to me.
We have said this before, and I will say it again on this podcast. If there is a fucking tournament that is desperate to be owned by the fans, it's the Davis Cup.
It's the Davis Cup.
It's the Davis Cup.
And we could probably buy the trophy. We definitely could. Before we get to two challenges remaining, Bush, I wanted to go over Arsenal 4, Leeds 1. Leeds clearly in some problems right now. But why is Luke Ayling playing against Arsenal? He should be sat for these games. Please tell me.
Former Arsenal Academy prospect.
It's bad. I don't think this is good for him. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's not great. It's going to be a rough end to the season. That being said, there's a lot of terrible teams in there. So I don't know. I don't think Leeds are good enough to stay up, but we'll see what happens. Stranger things have happened in the Premier League. I
didn't mean to shock you with this Arsenal Leeds talk, but this game happened and we didn't talk about it because I was a bit concerned after 3-1 because now every game is life or death. But yeah, the beautiful game, as we say.
It's true. I have two other stories that I just wanted to touch back on. Number one being that Naomi Osaka was quoted during the course of the week basically saying that she was motivated to come back to the sport following or after her pregnancy and looking to add to her Grand Slam totals.
Hey.
She also, in the very same statement, said that it was kind of like taking a break from the sport, which I thought was very funny.
That's great. That's good. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
And then finally, let's go full circle. Let's talk about the aforementioned pickleball exhibition match, because I think the quote that caught a lot of one's attention was the Andy Roddick one, basically saying like, yeah, I wouldn't be here unless they're paying me to.
I mean, once again, I did like seeing Andre. I won't lie. I wonder what you feel about this, Bush, because I know you're a massive Andre person, but I love seeing him back in like this mix. And I kind of love that. Everything else about it though,
to me, seeing Andre Agassi playing pickleball is the equivalent of Andre Agassi shilling NFTs.
Really?
Pickleball is the NFT equivalent in tennis. That's what it is.
Wow. People need to be active, man. They need to be okay. All right. I guess. No, that's not. And I guess that's off the back of that Andy Roddick quote, though, because you can't believe anyone would be there from the goodness of their heart. Probably not.
Like we said before, right? It is an astroturfed venture capitalist piece of propaganda. Like it is pumped up to the max to try and explain that this sport is exploding all over the world. Yeah, you can make anything look like it's exploding when you're throwing millions of dollars at it and you've got VCs involved in it.
To me, the sign that they've run out of ideas of like how to market things or like how to try hard is the Miami final was literally happening as this was going on. Like as much as again, like John McEnroe, I see John McEnroe all the time. I could see a lot less of him. But like Michael Chang, fantastic. Andre Agassi, fantastic. Andy Roddick, don't see him do much playing wise anymore. Fantastic.
Also, like low key, John McEnroe's not a draw. Like
no, but this is nuts though, because like apparently he is. There's some segment. So again, yeah. I hope they don't take the sport away from us. I'll let you insert between the lines of what that could be. What exactly? What? Perhaps we'll leave it there. All right, 2 challenges remaining, Bush. Let's save this boat, buoy this boat, I guess.
Yeah,
it's a saying they use.
Sure, I always find that funny between someone who's lived in both continents, right? Grew up in the UK, is that we get a buoy and boy. Oh, is it buoy? What the fuck are you talking about?
It's a buoy.
Something like a child would say that, like a 3-year-old would say it. Anyway. My 2 challenge remaining is something which is I already touched on, which was the Dan Olsen video, the Folding Ideas video, and the follow-ups, the NFT one that he did earlier in the course of, I want to say, the back end of last year. And this one is about the overall look at the metaverse, quote unquote, about what it is, because you'll be hearing a lot about this over the next year or so as a bunch of tech billionaires try and tell you that it is something that is necessary and inevitable. And the reality being it's nonsense, and it always has been nonsense. So I very much encourage everyone to check that video out. It's really interesting. His NFT one was outstanding, and I think is still worth going back and watching, being 2 years removed from whatever the fuck that was. So check it out if you get the opportunity.
I will take that recommendation. Bush, you have a 100% record of recommending YouTube videos to me that I actually watch. So I want you to know that. Fantastic. Mine is getting over my fear of hanging things, like photos, things on the wall. I got a really bad track record of doing that. Either A, hanging them incorrectly, or B, hanging them well enough so they can fall down in a shocking way 2 to 3 weeks later. But I'm getting better at this through some guidance from my partner. But one step at a time. This is on video for once, Bush, at least between me and you, but you can see there's a photo behind me. It's a really lovely Racket magazine photo.
Love it.
Of one of their covers. So yeah, we're hanging stuff. We're doing it live, 2023. The world is our oyster.
We can do it. I believe in us. I really do.
All right. We'll leave it there. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/openairpod. So I wanted to spend a bit of time on this, Bush, because I mean, there's some crime in Josh, obviously, we know him well, but Easy Ace Machine, with one of the greatest explanations, in-depth dives into a player's play pattern, kind of what's going on between their psyche injury-wise. The Discord is good. I'm not just saying that because we're part of it, Bush. It's good. So I would recommend you to join it.
Discord is fantastic. And we say this every week. We do genuinely appreciate all of our patrons and everyone who takes the time to listen to us doing this. It does mean the world. And that Discord is something that keeps me invested in the sport. Because like with everything, you've got to have people who inspire you. You've got to have just people in general that get up for it. Because it's a slog, this sport, throughout the course of the year. When you're literally running 10 and a half months of the whole thing, there are going to be times that it's not going to feel like a whole, you're going to feel like you don't want really to be involved in it. And I think that Discord always keeps me coming back to it and feeling fired up to be a part of it. So massive thanks and massive love.
Extremely well said. We're on Twitter as well. I mean, That should definitely go down the toilet soon. I don't even see. I guess, yeah. I mean, just search Open Era. You'll probably find us on there. Whatever.
No Mastodon account yet? We haven't gone in that direction. Got to be soon, right?
Oh no, I'm done. I'll give up after that. I'm done. I don't need to do this.
They all laughed at me, didn't they? They fucking laughed at me when I went back to Tumblr, and they were like, it's done. Everything's.
Look at him.
Hey,
look at Simon. Look at Simon on
Twitter's
his
dead.
HTML.
Twitter's dead. TikTok's gonna die. Come back to fucking Tumblr, people.
I don't think I have any more shoutouts. Yeah, go on Patreon, get us on there, and we're on Twitter forever as long as it exists. Okay. For producer Greg on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.